It's a life-changing health condition which affects more than 100 million people worldwide. The consequences of stroke can be devastating, and the number of people having them is rising. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, stress, obesity and diabetes are all believed to be behind an increase in people having a stroke, which causes damage to the brain. And it appears to be on the rise among young people. To mark World Stroke Day, we're looking at the impact of the condition and how it can be prevented. Well, let's meet our guests. In Los Angeles, in the United States, we have stroke survivor Joe Borges. In London, Dr. Khaled Sadek, who is a UK doctor and founder of the Arista Medical Clinic in London. And I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio is Julia Ajayi, partner of a stroke survivor and co-host of the Brain Injury podcast On a Good Day. And Caroline Smith is founder of the charity Interact Stroke Support. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Joe, I'll come to you first of all. Just tell us a bit about what happened to you. And I've heard you on a podcast where you said that you view your stroke as a blessing.
Absolutely. It definitely was a blessing. August 4th, 2016, I had a high blood pressure induced hemorrhagic stroke. So my right basal ganglia ruptured and it changed my life forever. I don't necessarily see it as a negative thing because it helped me become the person I think I truly was meant to be. You go one of two ways. You could give up and you could just say, this is this horrible thing. Oh, woe is me. Or you can embrace it and try to change for the better, and not just for myself, but for others out there.
Dr. Khaled, I'll come to you. Why are people having strokes? Just tell us what's happening in the human body that leads to a stroke.
Yeah, there are two main types of stroke. The one that we've just heard described earlier is hemorrhagic stroke. That's where the brain material is deprived of oxygen and nutrients that causes it to die in effect. And so in hemorrhagic stroke, there is a catastrophic sort of blood loss, and therefore oxygen is not being able to deliver to the brain matter, and therefore it dies. And then there's ischemic stroke, and that's where there's a clot, not necessarily a bleed out, but a clot that therefore blocks the downstream supply of oxygen to brain matter and causing it to die. So two types of stroke, either it's hemorrhagic or ischemic. We've also got something known as sort of transient ischemic attack, and that's where you have sort of a mini stroke. The symptoms last for about 24 hours and then they resolve, and those are early warning signs that you may be at risk for getting further strokes in the future.
Julia, just tell us what happened to your partner, Hector.
Well, we were living in Nigeria at the time, and Hector had been having headaches. And then one night, in the middle of the night, he got up, he went to the toilet, he was sick, which would be very unusual for him, and basically collapsed. And it didn't take me very long to realise that something pretty catastrophic had happened and that he'd had a stroke.
And tell me, how has the recovery been?
Well, we're 15 years on, and Hector is my inspiration. He is so motivated by life and has continued to be so in everything that he does. And he always says that the children as well have been a motivation for him to get up every morning and keep making a little bit of recovery. And he's done that, and he's good, he's up, he's walking, he works a little bit, and not doing the things that he did before, but really making the best of the opportunities and life that he has.
Caroline, the figures on this are extraordinary. I mean, one stroke every 5 minutes. Yes. I mean, this is life-changing for so many people.
Absolutely.
And tell me, the impact on families.
I think it's enormous. What we really deal with the patient in hospitals and in stroke clubs, and the whole idea is that professional actors go in to read to patients, and it's stimulation that one's on about, because it's just been mentioned to give up or to motivate, and that's what we're all about. My brother was a psychiatrist, and he used to say to me, he was very interested in the arts and how it could help health. And the thing that I keep on remembering what he used to say was that in his experience, a stimulated patient was a positive patient, and a positive patient had the potential to recover more quickly. And that is what we try to do, help that side of things.
Let's talk to Joe about recovery. Joe, how is your life now? How have you managed to get back to, give us an idea of the percentage of where you are compared to where you used to be?
I'm in a really good place. I've been called a walking, talking miracle because I shouldn't be as functional as I am. I have some tremors in my right hand. I have some short-term memory issues, but besides that, I think I am as close to where I was as I can be. Physically, emotionally, and mentally, I think I'm in a much better place. I've shifted the way that I think and the way that I process information. And like I said, my stroke wasn't a curse; it was a blessing.
And tell me, Joe, honestly, was stress a big factor in your life? I mean, what led up to the stroke?
Absolutely. I joke a lot that I'm a recovering Catholic. I was taught to never really inconvenience anybody. If you have an issue, just shove it down. Never went to therapy, never processed any information. So I just held everything in, which is horrible. And it worked for 39 years of my life until it all built up and exploded in my right basal ganglia. So after my stroke, I fundamentally changed every single aspect of my life.
Dr. Khaled, how unusual is it for men in particular to be getting strokes in this age, late 30s? I mean, have you come across cases like Joe?
Yeah, I mean, we typically in the UK see about 100,000 strokes a year, and the large majority, 75%, are in the over 65s, but there's still about 25% of those strokes happening in under 65s. And like in Joe's case, there are risks factors, and being a man, unfortunately, is a big risk factor for developing a stroke, as well as other risk factors that can be modifiable that Joe's sort of alluded to. You've got stress, you've got sedentary lifestyle, obesity, blood pressure and diabetes. All of these are risk factors that sort of afflict the modern population. But then there are lots of factors that you can't really change. So, your ethnicity, so if you're Black, Asian, or ethnic minority, you're at increased risk of stroke. We've mentioned being a man, and also with age as well. The older we get, the higher the risk of stroke.
Julia, talk us through the warning signs. There will be a lot of people genuinely don't know very much about strokes because they've been blessed enough not to have them happen in their families. What kind of warning signs should people be looking out for?
Well, I think as we heard earlier, TIAs are certainly a warning sign. But I think also there's a lot of undiagnosed issues that people might have that they don't actually realise might be warning signs. And stress and high blood pressure, I think come into those categories. So I think it's that ongoing kind of monitoring of health and lifestyle that's going to really help people avoid strokes where they can.
And you said Hector had been having these headaches in the run-up to what happened to him. So was that brought on by stress or work or?
Well, we don't quite know, but it may be related to high blood pressure or stress. But I think that's one of the difficult things, that once something catastrophic like that happens, of course, then actually the rationale and the reason becomes, almost unimportant with the huge changes that it brings and how you have to adapt to that afterwards.
And talk me through rehabilitation then. So the hospital finishes its work and a stroke survivor is sent back home to their family, but that's just the beginning of a long journey.
It is a beginning, and the hospital, Hector was in hospital in Cambridge, in Addenbrooke's, which was fabulous, with occupational therapists, speech therapists, physiotherapists. But of course, as you say, once you get home, there might be a community team, as there was with Hector, that worked with him for about 6 weeks. But after that, what I feel very strongly about is it's the social connections, community connections, and family and friends support around that can really improve people's outcomes. And that's one reason why we started the podcast as well, to talk around some of those issues. Because the more support that someone has, the more opportunity there is for purposeful activity, for positive risk-taking. And I think all of those things can really make a difference to someone's recovery.
Caroline, just on the issue of stimulation, so your charity goes to people who are recovering and reads to them.
Yes.
And that obviously gives people a huge boost.
Yes, I think it does, and makes them laugh And, and I think the whole thing too is the motivation to, well, to do all the hard work, it seems to me, that stroke involves. I mean, you know, you suddenly, I think, but you suddenly are like a baby again. You've got to learn to walk in some cases. All strokes are different, but sometimes you have to learn to, and the frustration and the hard work involved is what we try to help get people motivated to want to do it. A lot of our occupational therapists and speech therapists are now saying that patients, after they've been read to by us, are much more interested in involving themselves in all that hard work. And that's what we do.
Joe, talk to me about the community of stroke survivors. You know, how important is that support base?
I think that support is just as important as physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, because after you have a stroke, you're a different person. You feel like an alien inside of your own body. Other stroke survivors are the only ones that truly understand what it's like. And when you're able to communicate that to somebody that gets it, it gives you the understanding, it gives you the motivation, it gives you the hope that you lack right after you get home from the hospital.
And Joe, tell us what drove you then to make your recovery, because, you know, you look and sound like a really healthy guy, but I guess it's been a very fraught journey at times.
I fundamentally changed everything about my life, the way that I eat, the way that I think, the way that I move. There wasn't an option. That's not an option. So I chose to move forward and be the best version of myself with the second opportunity that I have.
And Joe, just tell us, what are the issues you still struggle with now, all these years? What is it, like 8 years onwards? What do you still struggle with?
Overstimulation, brain fog is always an issue. The constant feeling of overwhelm when you're in places, even in large groups. When I'm driving at night, the lights will set me off. Physically, I'm doing well. I just have a little bit of issues with my right hand when I overexert it. If I'm, let's say, putting together furniture, I'll get really clumsy. I won't be able to grip very much. But besides that, it's mostly just cognitive issues. When I'm tired, I'll forget things. I'll forget names. I'll forget people. And the fact that I do look so, I'm doing the quotes here, I do look so normal, it's hard for people to understand that I still have a brain injury, even 8 years later.
Dr. Khaled, just come in on the issue of awareness. Just talk to me, what should people be looking out for? I mean, getting someone to a doctor, getting someone to medical treatment if they've had or are having a stroke is absolutely vital. What are the key kind of warning signs on that front?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So getting somebody to hospital and getting the right form of treatment will reduce the damage that lack of blood supply is doing to the brain. So remember, we've got the two types. We've got the ischemic, where the blood clot has blocked the downstream oxygen supply, and we've got the hemorrhagic, where there's a bleed out. And so being able to identify the symptoms to look out for to get people into hospital as quickly as we can so we can administer the right treatment. And the government has really been quite keen on, I don't know if you've seen it, but the mnemonic FAST. So F stands for face. So if you are sitting with someone on the couch, you're watching television, and they're saying, look, I've got a facial droop or something, you should be thinking stroke. A, arms. If they're saying that they can't raise their arm up and it's feeling heavy, you should be thinking stroke. S, speech. If you're speaking to somebody and then suddenly they're overcome by some form of slurred speech, and you're not able to understand them, and that's out of the ordinary, you should be thinking stroke. And that takes us to T, time to call 999. As soon as we get to hospital, we can start thrombolytic treatment to remove the blood clot that's blocking the oxygen downstream, or we can undergo emergency surgery to block off the ruptured aneurysm that's causing the bleed out on the brain, like Joe's described.
Julia, just talk to me about the impact on wider family, particularly if a stroke survivor has young children and they're used to their parent being able to do certain things, and then suddenly they come home from hospital after maybe months and months, and they're having to learn how to read again, to write, and to walk, hold a knife and fork. I mean, it's hugely challenging.
It is. I think the impact starts right at the beginning, really, because the period of time when my husband was in hospital, actually the children were then having to navigate the hospital experience with their dad being ill. So I think that it's, coming home then is a whole nother level of adaptations for us all. thinking about how those relationships develop over time as well as the children have grown up and as we as parents have aged. So yes, it's been a big impact. And how do the children then talk about it with their friends? What support do they get? How do their friends understand the differences as well in their dad? And so there's a lot of emotional support, I think, following that trauma for the whole family.
And for you as a partner, I mean, how deep did you have to dig to keep going and provide that level of support for not just your partner, but children and wider family?
Well, I think at first it's autopilot and you do what I think anyone would do. You pull out all the stops and you don't even realize you're doing it. You're running on adrenaline for weeks and months and that keeps you going. It certainly did for me. But I think that it's when, particularly when Hector came home, that the reality set in. And I think building up a support network of people and realizing that you do need to ask for help and that that's a good thing and other people want to give help. And having been someone that hadn't really needed to do that before, that was a learning process for me, but a very valuable one.
And tell me, is that why you launched the podcast On a Good Day, to basically offer support or a resource for people in your situation that they could learn more and perhaps kind of interact with the community?
Yes, absolutely. It can be a very isolating experience, obviously, as Joe said, for the person who's had the stroke and also for partners and other family members. So we hope that through the podcast, it's a place that people can come and listen to a huge range of experiences from professionals and also people with lived experience as carers or as stroke survivors, and gain some support and insight.
Caroline, that's quite sad to hear that it's an isolating experience, which is where a charity like you guys come in to provide support and lift people.
Yes, absolutely. And also we do, I mean, following on with that, we do a lot of stroke clubs, about 30 stroke clubs. And also we now have started something called Interact at Home. Again, it's the same idea, contacting each other, which is basically when people get home, we can either read over the Zoom, yes. Anyway, so there's, yes, it's all to do with that, getting people back, hoping that patients, a lot of patients talk to us about that we never thought we could laugh again in here. And it's that sort of isolation feeling in a hospital, which is what we hope to do, you know, bring in sort of professional actors who can make you laugh and enjoy it. Just enjoy, dare I say it, yes.
Dr. Khaled, how important are charities then when a stroke survivor goes home and, you know, the hospital support perhaps is kind of decreasing or they don't need to be in hospital as regularly, but there are amazing charities out there doing brilliant work?
I think they're absolutely vital because the stroke has profound impact on your life for the rest of your life. A lot of the injury that you sustain is irreversible. And so being able to have a community around you who can provide stimulation through art or exercise, put you into the company of others with similar conditions is absolutely critical, because once you do have a stroke, your life is going to change quite significantly. And when the hospital withdraws its acute treatment, we're now left with chronic disabilities and life-changing illness. So they're absolutely vital to get people back onto their feet, bring up their mood, make them re-engage with society, and give them the tools that they need to communicate with their family and loved ones as well. So, you know, a priceless effort from the charities that are dealing with stroke patients in the community.
Joe, there will be people watching who have had a stroke and perhaps won't be feeling as good as you look and sound right now. What words of encouragement would you give them based on your experience?
Find others, reach out, be that stranger to reach out to somebody else. That connection means everything. You know, when you mention isolation doesn't come from not having people around. It comes from not feeling understood. And other stroke survivors, we understand. If it wasn't for me having a chance meeting with the co-host of my podcast, I would not be here today. I was isolated. I was alone. Once I started speaking to her, my world changed. I was able to smile again. I was able to laugh again and look at the bright side. You know, there's a lot more bright side than dark side to brain injury recovery. You know, we're here. We made it. Don't lose hope. Once you have hope, you have everything that you need.
And Joe, in your experience and from talking to the stroke survivor community, which countries are good places? I know it sounds a terrible thing to say, but which countries are good places to be in recovering from a stroke?
Australia, by far, they have an incredible stroke unit in their hospitals. And a lot of my Australian stroke survivor friends, they just have had amazing experiences and are like miles ahead of where we are here in the States. Also, the UK. The UK has some great programs for stroke survivors. So if you're looking to connect with survivors, definitely check out the UK. The US over here, it's hit or miss, I'm going to be honest. The UK, Australia, definitely the top two in the world.
But Julia, just come to you on that. Your experience, would you go along with the UK being a good place to be a stroke survivor?
Well, I think there are challenges wherever you are, but yes, I think that we've received amazing care, and the neurosurgery and the expertise in this country is huge. But obviously the journey then beyond the mechanics and the physiology into the rehab is also part of it. So I think that, of course, we would want more resources, particularly in the community, because it is a lifelong condition. But yes, there are some excellent professionals here that we can draw on.
And tell me, you always hear politicians talking about the National Health Service. Strokes never get mentioned.
Very rarely, and I think that there are some health conditions that get much higher profile coverage and funding. And of course, stroke affects so many people that I do feel passionately that it is an area that needs more intervention and more resources and more training and awareness, both for beforehand, for prevention, but also afterwards.
Caroline, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
You know, you don't generally hear Keir Starmer or anyone else talking about strokes or money going into stroke survivors and research.
Absolutely, it's one of the forgotten ones. And I think we need to shout about it a lot more, actually. I mean, we do our best, but I think all charities are small, except for the Stroke Association, but we're a very small outfit, you know, and are dependent on trusts and foundations to keep us going. And we've now been going 25 years and hope to go on another 25 years. But it's, it's an uphill job, really.
We wish you the very best of luck, Caroline.
Thank you.
Dr. Khaled, why do you think that is? I mean, you don't generally see very much in the media. We hear an awful lot about breast cancer, prostate cancer. All of the cancers get huge media coverage, but strokes generally don't get much news pickup.
Yeah, I think the awareness among the public is increasing. And I think when it comes to stroke, there's a lot of medical education going towards the modifiable factors that actually cause stroke. So when we think about the amount of awareness that goes into diabetes, cholesterol, obesity, and blood pressure, all of those are modifiable factors that will cause a stroke. So when you think of stroke in that picture, within the metabolic disease umbrella, we are getting a lot of education through the sort of the bigger headlines. If we attack the root cause, we should see some downstream impact on the complications of those conditions. So if we can get the national obesity levels down, if we can make everybody aware about diabetes and blood pressure, then we're going to have a real-time impact on stroke prevention.
Final question to Joe. Joe, I was amazed listening to you on a podcast to hear you say that you didn't initially go to hospital when it happened. Is that true?
That's very true. My partner, she's a musician, and I was at her show. And from the parking lot to the venue, that's when I had my stroke. I felt the basal ganglia rupture. I actually heard it in my ears. And I as soon as that happened, I felt relief from the migraine I had. And a few seconds later, every muscle fiber from my body turned into jelly. And I went to the venue. The last thing I remember saying is that I feel like a baby deer learning to walk again. And then I don't remember anything for a few months. But apparently I went inside, had a couple beers, went home, complained a little bit about a headache, laid down, and I ended up not going to the hospital until the next, I believe, afternoon.
Joe, we wish you the very best of luck for a continued successful recovery. And our thanks to Dr. Khaled, Julia, and Caroline here in the studio as well. A very important topic. Now, remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.